Hi, Jay, and welcome. And thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Lisa. Yes, thank you for inviting me to have a conversation. Um, yeah, I'm happy to be here too.
And we're going to talk about normalizing trauma and normalizing conversations around trauma. And that is a very big topic. So we're probably only going to, cover a little corner of it. But I think it's such an important conversation. And I'm really glad that we're having it today.
Yeah, um, yeah, it's something that's been coming up for me, just through my own journey, but also observing others in their journey.
Mhm.
Um, what is trauma? Like, I feel um, well, maybe I'll just go straight there. That when I used to think about trauma, I wouldn't have ever applied it to myself, to my own experiences, because it felt very big and explosive and
Mhm.
instant and extreme. And it's not that I haven't actually had those experiences in my life either. I have had those experiences too, but it just felt like something that was not related to me and my life. It felt um, like there would be some kind of tangible outcome from that, right? Some
Mhm.
kind of tangible impact that I could see or touch from a traumatic experience or from experiencing trauma. So
Mm.
yeah.
Yeah. I hear you. And you say that it's also coming up in your work. And I'm wondering if you just want to start off by introducing yourself a little bit, like what do you do? What is your work? How do you relate to your clients and the trauma healing part?
Yeah, so I always find this an interesting question. I see other people answer it with such clarity sometimes, and I I feel like it's always evolving in some way, for me. But I would say at the moment, um, I'm very focused on creating spaces where people can feel authentic or can learn to feel more authentic,
Mm.
and learn to discover what authentic means for them without shame or fear of judgment or the need to change or fix anything. And that shows up. I hold circles for women of color, Black women and women of color, and I also hold individual one-to-one sessions, which I call embodied healing, which blends a number of different modalities from my own journey, yoga, um, and I want to say, I feel the need to say not yoga asana, like which is the posture part of yoga. I
Mm.
cover that as well, but very much the breathing techniques, so pranayama, mantra, mudra, meditation. So the full spectrum of yoga, and focalizing, which is how we connected,
Yes.
as a somatic um, based healing modality, I would call it, and also um, African spirituality, indigenous Celtic spirituality and practices, um, things like divination, card reading. There's a lot of um, yeah, there's many different tools that I work with on a personal level and have started to integrate into my offering as well. So that's not a very concise, neat way of saying what I do, but that's where I'm at with it.
I loved your introduction, and it's always, well, I at least find it awkward to have to introduce yourself. It's always like,
Mm,
this is what I do. And it is,
mm,
I love because you're speaking about authenticity also, and it felt like a very authentic presentation of it, like, this is what I do. And I love that you mentioned all of your tools because that's also how I see you, like as a teacher and a healer with a big toolbox. And
mm,
I think that really influences our work, right? What we bring in along with us. And yeah, you and I met in the focalizing training, and I so appreciate all the tools that we have with us from that. And at the same time, we have lived long lives. So we're also bringing all of that into the space when we are like doing sessions and holding circles. And
mm,
before we started this conversation, before I pressed record, we talked about this thing about what is trauma. And we talked about when we were actually becoming trauma informed, trauma aware, and the growing up and being a young person and a young woman. And how did you think about trauma? I mean, I didn't walk around thinking about trauma, but if you heard the word or heard it mentioned, what did you think trauma was when you were younger?
mm. Great question. I'm not sure that I heard it much when I was younger. I'm not sure that I heard the term much trauma. I would say that I feel I became more aware in adult life and related it more to war and disasters and these extreme mass events. Um, yeah, rather than anything maybe that would be related to me. So
Mm,
um, I didn't have a relationship, I would say, with trauma.
yeah.
I hadn't, yeah, connected what that even meant. I wouldn't even suppose if I rewind back to my 22-year-old self, um, it wasn't in my vocabulary, really,
Oh,
I would say.
that is such a good point. Yeah, that's exactly how I would describe my experience
Mm,
also. Like, I just didn't know. I didn't know that it was a thing. I didn't know. I knew that the way I grew up wasn't great. I knew it wasn't, I wouldn't even say supportive because I didn't use a word like supportive. So I knew that it wasn't as good as it could have been. And I
mm,
also felt shame. Like, I felt like I had to hide it, felt like I had to be normal and pretend that
right.
things had been okay. But I wasn't aware at all that it was trauma. And for me, it has just been so helpful to be able to name things and be like, oh, this is what it was. It has helped me like untangle what was normal, what was not normal,
Mm,
what the different like things were and how they related to each other rather than it just being like an entangled mess.
yeah.
So I'm just wondering how do you see that show up in your work? Like, how do you experience the like conversations with clients or potential clients around trauma? Is it, is there an awareness? Is most of your work creating that awareness, or
Mm.
how do you see that?
Yeah, there's a lot of um, very gentle, very slow awareness creating. Um, because I see the reflection of myself in the people that I work with, in that there has been a normalizing of their experiences. Oh well, everyone has something,
Mm,
this kind of flattening of something that has impacted, that has had an impact, but not, I don't want to say wanting to acknowledge, not having maybe, as you say, the frame of reference or the vocabulary or the awareness to know how it's impacted and
mm,
how deep that potentially goes. Um, and it's making me think, when we initially discussed what we might talk about, and we both work in trauma informed spaces, so trauma is very present for me, at least.
mm,
And I thought, actually, what is the definition of trauma? Because I I had to go and like just check it out for myself. And the trauma, I saw that the word trauma is originally Greek. It comes from meaning a word meaning wound. And I think that is so powerful to just name and unveil, actually, that wounds are not just physical wounds. We have emotional wounds. At least with the physical wounds, we have something tangible to see and to touch and to identify. And we know that we have to do certain things to help the wounds heal, and there's a certain time that they take to heal. And you know it's much more in our consciousness, whereas these emotional wounds sit very much, I think, within the subconscious.
mm.
They're less tangible. They show up in like sense and notions and beliefs and patterns of behavior that are much more easier to normalize, are much more easier to say, oh, well, that's just me, that's part of my personality, or that's just the way I deal with things. Um,
Yeah, that story. That's just me. That's just how I am.
mm,
That's just how I deal.
mm. And that's what I see with the people I work with, is that there's a sense that's there's a sense that there's a disconnect between what they want and what is happening, or what they
Mm,
vision and what is happening and what they're experiencing, but not in a way that they can really articulate what that
yeah.
is. It's just a sense that something's not right, that they're not happy, that maybe they're not sleeping well, you know, um, that they're feeling overloaded or unable to maybe cope with everything. Or even at some level, it may not be that extreme. It may just be they just want to stop for a second. They just feel like they want to press stop for a second. They can't keep up with the pace of everything.
Hmm. Yeah,
Um,
I hear that. And I so often hear people say, I work mainly with women, so it's often women who say, I'm not even sure how to connect with my body, or I'm not even sure what this is, or I'm not sure how to describe this, as
mm,
if that is wrong. Like, I'm not sure what this is, or I'm not sure what the feeling is.
mm,
And one of the things that I hope my work helps normalize is that it is hard to describe, because as you're saying, it's for most part it's in our subconscious. Most of us have never learned to name these things. We don't know how to speak about them. So it is going to be muddy and fuzzy and imperfect and awkward, because that is how we get to talk about it and like learn to clarify, learn to name things. It's by slowly learning to be comfortable with the uncomfortable and being like,
mm,
yeah, it's weird. I'm not sure why it feels like this, or I'm not sure what I feel, or like, um, I feel empty. Like, that is so valid. That's a real thing to explore. It's not, like, we live in such a society of results and communication and productivity, and it's so easy to put those standards in healing spaces also and be like, let's create results in the healing journey, let's
mm,
be effective, let's get clear.
mm,
And there are just so many things that are not clear, and that doesn't make them any less valid or any less central to the healing journey or to the process. And
mm.
I want to help normalize that as someone who wants to heal, like, what your job is to show up, like find the person or the people that you want to heal with and show up, and then allow them to help you. It's up to them to help
Yeah,
you, navigate the muddiness and the unclarity and help you, because I don't know, I just think we put so much pressure on ourselves just in general, and I think it's easy to do that in the healing process also. And
yeah,
it's not helping us to try to push through the healing, right? It's really, it's another layer of productivity that is just very easy to fall into, because everything looks like that in the systems that we live within.
yeah. So many things as you were speaking, feeling so many things. But it's leading me to think about I work with women, Black women, women of color, and often one of the fears is around, or what I hear frequently is around not being able to stop or think about it too much, to explore what this really is, what this feeling is, because I cannot afford to collapse. I cannot collapse. There is no one to catch me.
Ugh, yeah, that one hits deep.
Mm, yeah, I feel it. I feel it in
Yeah.
myself as I say it.
And that is again just such a symptom of the systems we live within, right? That
Right.
we are so overloaded that
Mm,
our lives end up becoming having to hold it all together,
yeah,
right? Because there's such a pressure of time and money and
yeah,
making things work and keeping up, and it's overwhelming, and it's just not supportive for our systems, like our nervous systems and our just human, like, as being a human, we were not meant to be living in productivity
right,
systems. It's so
right,
unnatural for us, and it's just, that's why I think the work of circles, that's why circles are central to how I teach and how I hold space. And I love that you do
right,
that too, because I
right.
think that way of coming together, of everyone being equal, everyone learning from each other. um like I am the space holder, I'm the one calling it in, I'm the one, it's me who is like facilitating, but I'm also um it's just the humility of walking into circle and being like, I can learn from any one of you because any one of us has so much life experience and everyone has a unique story and brings something. That way of thinking, rather than the hierarchical systems that we live within, where like there's always someone above you who knows more or like are more than you, that that has completely changed how I walk into spaces and how I see healing, because I think that relating human to human and starting from there is just so powerful. And I moved each and every time I hold a circle because the women just bring such powerful
Mm,
stories, such powerful insights. They are so like their willingness to be vulnerable astounds me, because that is not something we learn or are encouraged to be in the
mhm,
society we live in. So vulnerability is something that we all have to learn and practice. And that is one of my favorite things about circle, the
mm,
being able to show up vulnerable and imperfect,
mm,
and yeah, take it from there.
mm. And I want to say that the circle provides the safety to do that, because that is really what's missing from general society. It's not safe to be vulnerable,
Mm,
and we've shown that again and again and again. And if you have ever been vulnerable in society, I mean, I know I can speak to myself of being vulnerable and how open that leads you to manipulation or um, harm of some sort. And the beauty of circle is that it's a shared space, as you say.
mm,
There's we all here together for each other, with each other, in support of each other, in honoring each other as whole beings, however we show up, how whatever kind of day we're having, you know, without the answer and without there being one
yes.
way.
Yeah.
There is no answer that we're seeking, really. There's, and I feel that that is the real space holding, is there is no answer here.
That is such a good point, because that's the whole. I've never even thought about it like that, but I can feel the relief, like physically,
Mm,
somatically, like in my body. I'm like, yes, that's the whole idea, that I'm walking into a space where I'm not result oriented. I'm not going into circle to feel better. I'm going into circle to connect.
yes.
And what you said about being vulnerable in society and being vulnerable to manipulation, that lands with so much heaviness, because again, that is just that's how our systems are, right? We live within oppressive systems, and that power over idea that we always have to control something and have to
Mm,
have power over something rather than meeting the other person, right? That shifts the whole way. I mean, just imagine what systems would look like if they were about connecting, right? We have created systems that are about control, and that has a lot deeper of an impact than I think any of us realize. Like it trickles down into everything, to our conversations, to how we show up, to what we want and how we want it. Everything is so control and power based that it is yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot to think about.
yeah, as you said, control. I felt my breath just deepen really, because I recognize my own um, pattern of control um, over myself, over
Mm,
situations, over others, as a trauma response, as a need to have everything in order so that I can be safe, essentially.
yeah.
And so I have started to think about the controlling structures in that way as some deep embedded trauma response of that's evolved into, its own monster, could we say, but maybe stemming from a desire to be safe
Mm,
fundamentally, which is, I'm bringing in my brand stuff a little bit, but the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the base requirement as a human is to feel safe and
mm.
secure. Um, so control is, yeah, that's very present for me in my personal journey. And I relate that to the manager part of me that wants to manage, and the hypervigilance, and making sure everything is just right, that I'm perfect, that I'm
Mm,
good, so that I am safe, so that I'm not left, so that I'm loved, you know.
yeah.
Um, so
Oh,
it's so interesting because that's just where I went. But this is the unconscious levels of trauma. I feel that show up in our behavior, which was something else we spoke about, which I wasn't thinking to go, going to go there, but it's interesting. They're so interrelated.
very, very. And that's also part of this, right? Learning to understand how things are connected and how they impact each other, because there's nothing simple about this. There's nothing simple about how our systems are set up or how they impact
Mm,
us or how trauma is weaved into our lives. That's not a choice, right? It's when we live within systems that are traumatizing and re-traumatizing us, then that's gonna be our reality. And it might sound bleak, but I'm not saying it to make like to catastrophize. It's really, for me, it's been so helpful and given me a lot of clarity on, as you're saying, like everyday things such as, why do I feel a need to control this, or why do I have anxiety about this, why is this showing up here, like very hands-on everyday things that are like, oh, I can see how when the underlying message all the time is about control and wanting to have power over others,
mm,
that that is gonna mess with your mind, right? It's gonna impact you when you keep having that impact and keep being told that, like directly or indirectly, that's
mm,
going to impact you as a human. And
mm,
yeah, I think it has taken us so far off course of like who we are, like at our center. And yeah, that's a lot about, that's how I tap into my work. It's like, I think there's really a lot to come back to, and I think it's about going back to the core, going back to simplicity, going back to who we are as humans. And it sounds so simple, and it can be a really complex journey. And that's part of why I really love the circle idea, because that means that we don't have to walk it alone, right? We don't have to
mm,
try and navigate um, that journey on our own. We can walk alongside others. And it really does make it easier to just hear other stories and hear how others are dealing, how others are supporting themselves. Because for most of us, learning to support ourselves is really something that we have to learn. Because for most of us, it's not something that we learned growing up, because our systems are not created in a way where we're asking ourselves, like, how are you supporting yourself? Um, so
yeah,
that, yeah, I
yeah,
love that we have that in common.
yeah. when systems are not set up for support.
Nope.
That's, yeah, that hits. I feel that right here, that our systems are not set up to support us. And it brings me back to the managing. Everything is being managed. People are being managed. Um, you know, everything has some kind of commercial tie to it. Now, some kind of outcome, as you said, around productivity, and
Mm.
productivity equals value. If you're not productive in society, then you're of less value, less worth. So there's these continuous messages that I feel it takes a level of awareness, a level of space, a level of slowing down
Mm.
to be able to notice the impact of these structures that we are operating within or exist within.
Yeah.
And that that is part of the awareness piece. That's part of the education piece of we're encouraged constantly to not stop, to not um, to find the answer, to
Mm.
have the solution, to be
Yeah.
productive,
To fix it.
to fix it. And all the time we're doing that, we're not stopping.
Mm.
We're not stopping and listening to something else, which, and that something else is generally us, and generally, I'm going to say, coming from the body somewhere that
Mm.
is valuable, which is why somatic work and embodiment is so important to me personally on my journey, because it's that layer of wisdom or intelligence that we have. We have access. Well, I don't want to say access, but we have what we need.
Mm.
Often we're we're socialized into believing that what we need is out there, that it must be achieved, that it must be given or earned in some way.
Yeah.
And this embodiment practice, somatic practice, circles, all of these tools or practices are here to allow you to connect to what you already have. Um,
Yes.
and I'm thinking to, when you said come to someone who can guide you, we're talking about safe space, we're talking about the space to explore yourself authentically. Um, and I want to say there is someone holds that space for you, but it's for you. It's for
Mm-hmm.
you to
Yeah.
dis or uncover. I want to say not discover because it's already there, but uncover.
Yeah. I
Um,
love that point. That is such a that's probably what I love most about somatics, that it's not learning something, as you've also mentioned, learning something the way someone else is doing it. It is
mm,
inviting you to explore yourself, your body, your emotions, your inner world, your patterns, where you are. It's not asking you to do something in a specific way.
yes.
And that really, for me, is why it's also working, why it's actually helping to heal those wounds that are within, because
Mm,
um, it is a way where you actually can learn to access them and learn how to take care of them and help those wounds heal. because it's about you and not about the way we do it. It's about you.
Yeah.
And before we end up, I just want to, because we talked about normalizing trauma, and I just want to say again, or try to make a point of, like, when you're talking about connecting with the body and connecting with ourselves, that what I hear so often is that it doesn't feel safe to do so, that it
Yeah.
doesn't, um, that people don't know how to do it. And I just want to make the point again that that is part of it. Like showing up and being like, I don't know how to do this. It feels horrible. And you invite me to connect with my body. I'm like, fuck you. I want to go home.
Mm.
That is, there's nothing wrong with that. That is the work. That is the work. We start from there and
Right.
be like, cool, let's feel into
Yeah.
that. Let's see what we can do with that. There's no, um, I just really want to normalize that healing isn't shiny and pretty. It's not
Right.
like getting up in the morning and, you know, doing beautiful yoga in the, sunrise. That's not, real life healing. It's supposed to be messy and, at times it's very muddy and sticky, and that's the nature of it. But that's also why it works, because it's not shiny and pretty. It's actually real, and it can be very raw, and that's why it's so important to find those spaces that feel safe enough for you to start connecting with some of these things, start putting yourself and your healing first. And that can be
Right.
really hard to do, but being in a circle or in a community where you see others do that, that can be so helpful.
Mm. Yeah. Thank you for naming that. Thank you for saying that, because that is so true from my own experience, my journey. It's messy, it's not linear, it doesn't really make sense all the time.
Yep.
um, but it's unfolding, and it's really um, a process of learning to know and accept yourself, myself. Um, and there's no right or wrong way to do that. There's no pace that is set. There's no map.
Mm,
um, it's an exploration. It's an open exploration, and I think you said at some point a willingness, just a willingness
yeah.
to be with yourself in all of the forms that you show up.
Yeah. Yeah. And that can be hard, right? I will say that the healing sessions I have done that have been the most powerful have been when I have showed up and said, I don't want to be here today. I'm here,
Mm.
but I don't want to be here. I'm not going, but I don't want to be here. I hate this. I think everything you're saying is annoying. I don't want to be here, but I'm staying. They're like staying with it when it's
Yeah,
fucking frustrating. You're like, this shit is not helping
yeah,
anything. Why am I doing this?
yeah,
Because that is
yeah,
going to come up. Those days are going to be there. They are normal. They're part of the process. And I just want to
yes,
normalize that and de-shame it and be like, that's how it's supposed
agree.
to be. That's
Yeah,
like the giving, like my impulse to give up is so strong that I'm like, yeah, fuck that. I'm just gonna go back
yeah,
to not healing, not being aware, because that was easier. There's definitely a part of me that feels that way, and
yeah,
I'm very present with that part, because those days to stay in session and to be like, okay, let's do the work even if I don't believe in it, that is that can be very powerful. So I love that you call healing messy. It's definitely messy.
mm,
And yeah, I think it's also why it's working. It's because we're actually allowing it to be messy rather than the shiny pretty that everything in our capital structure, like structures, are made out to be. Like everything is shiny and pretty and surface, right? And healing is anything but surface, right? It's everything, layers and layers beneath the surface. And yeah.
I really just want to speak to the part the resistance piece and the protection piece, because of course you would want to protect yourself. It's an instinctive human response to want
Mm-hmm.
to protect yourself from any pain and any, disruption. Um, a, a mantra that I that came to me in this journey, and which I come back to regularly, is um, my resistance is a call for my healing. And I know that when I feel that resistance, that tightening, that not wanting to be there, that it's telling me something that I can turn towards. There is something there. I'm feeling something, and there is something there. And if the situation is right, if I know I'm in a safe space with people that are there to support me, I can turn towards it, and I will be okay.
Mm. Oh, I love the way you put that, turning towards it. That
Yeah,
for me, that is what it's all about, like learning to turn to what you're usually scared of or frustrated
yeah,
about or annoyed about or it just feels too painful to look at. Like learning to be able to meet that and be like, I'm breathing, I'm looking at you, fear or whatever it is, and be like, let me have a conversation with you. Because
mm,
that is, learning to do that and make it really concrete rather than some abstract idea, and learning to feel into it and learning to be with that process rather than wanting to escape or numb.
yeah,
That
yes,
is, yeah, there's so much learning in that, so much
yes,
healing.
yes. I just want to finish with, when I've done that, my experience, and I've observed it with others, that when I turn towards it, it's not what I thought it was. Often,
Often, yeah.
often.
And there are answers there, like if you have the right support and the right people to guide you, you're holding so many answers. And I'm not, again, not in like a shiny, pretty way of like everything is good and everything is happy. Like it's
Yeah,
not that, but
yeah,
there are little, like your subconscious carries answers that your mind is like it's just not aware of. And with the right tools, you can get some clarity and learn to understand what's going on, and learning to understand those patterns can be like the first step to
yeah,
untangle everything that is happening within you.
yeah, yeah. Untangle. That's the word.
Untangle, yes.
That's the word. Yeah,
Okay, Jay, thank you so much for this conversation. I think we better end it here, or we can talk about this for days. So I really hope that you will come back, because the thing you mentioned about how trauma impacts us and impacts our choices, I really hope you are up for coming back and having a conversation about that, because I think that is such another beautiful conversation that I would love to have with you.
yeah, most definitely. I would love to have that conversation. Yeah, and I've enjoyed how this conversation has unfolded itself. Um, when I say enjoy, um, I mean that this is valuable. This is necessary conversation. I really feel it as we're speaking, that this is a sharing, um, that hopefully people will feel reflected in their own lives, and it will give some hope or clarity or direction for maybe what next.
Exactly. And that was our intention, right? To
Mm,
normalize talking about trauma, to try and
mm.
put some words to some of it, and just to share our perspective. And I feel this was a really good first step to doing that. So thank you so much for being here. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.